All right, so we are here. This is our third podcast, Bullhorn Podcast. Josh and Tino is here, and we have our first guest, who is Colorado animal attorney Juliet Piccone. I said that right, Juliet?
Actually, it's Piccone.
So I failed. Yes, I failed out the gate.
That's what I thought, Piccone, like Madonna. Madonna's real last name.
Juliet Piccone is here. She has been on the ground in Aurora fighting their breed-specific legislation and the active attempts to repeal that legislation. And what's funny to me and a lot of people is here last week, the talking points coming out of the media as regarding what actually happened and what didn't happen. It seems like all the journalists got it wrong. Is that accurate, yes, Juliet?
They absolutely got it wrong. And if you're one of the people that just looks at the headline, all the headline said that BSL was gone, the attempt to repeal it was dead, and that we had failed, and that it was over, basically. And that wasn't the case at all.
Wait a minute. Did you say that the media got it wrong? That the media actually said something that was untrue? Is that what I'm hearing? I don't believe it.
Well, and the funny part of it is that the reporter that started this whole cascade of false information, she actually spoke directly to me. She quoted me in her article. It was the Aurora Sentinel. They usually do a fantastic job covering everything, but this was a different reporter than the one I normally deal with. And you know, we come out from this meeting and she's asking us about it, and basically what happened was there wasn't a majority of council members who actually said, we feel this is ready to go on the agenda right now. But that doesn't matter, because all that they needed was the one person who introduced the ordinance to say, I'm going to put it on the agenda, and she said, I'm going to put it on the agenda. And you know, we're going to tweak a few more pieces of it, and hopefully we think we're hoping and praying and thinking we probably are very, very close to getting the amount of votes that we need to actually get it repealed.
And you got 4 people to move it forward, right? Not just the one necessary.
That's correct. There were 4 people. You would have needed actually 6, because there's 10 total, so 6 would be a majority. But that's what we need to win. Once the vote comes up on March 24th, what we need to win is actually the 6 out of the 4, or if it's 5-5 and the mayor votes, either the mayor can break the tie, basically.
On the 24th, when the first official vote actually takes place, now let's just assume that there's 6 votes that you do get. Does it need to then go for a second vote to become official?
No, the vote on the 24th is the vote, and if we fail this time, it's going to be, we're just going to have to work more and in the future try to get it introduced again. But I'll be honest, if we fail this time, we're probably looking at least a year, maybe 2. Because the last time it came up was in 2011.
Compare what you guys were up against in 2011 to how it's going currently, and the differences that you guys are seeing. Because obviously it's going a lot better now, and you're very optimistic moving forward to the 24th.
So in 2011, just to make it clear, there was a couple things going on. We actually used to ban 10 different breeds of dogs, and that included American Bulldogs and Old English Bulldogs. So back in 2011, 2 things were going on. One was there was a Aurora citizen who was fed up with having to register her Bulldog as a grandfathered in restricted breed, because it was one of the ones that was alive back in 2006 when the ban first went ahead and was put in place. So this dog was allowed to be here, but they had to pay all these fines or all these extra, not fines, but registration fees for it being a restricted breed dog. And that person got sick and tired of doing that, so she started lobbying her council member to take her breed off of the list, basically. And at the same time, there was a lawsuit against Aurora where a Vietnam veteran whose pit bull service dog had actually been taken away from him for about 2 weeks, impounded, and then he had to let a friend keep it outside of the jurisdiction until he proved it was a service dog in court, which took like 6 months for him to prove in the criminal case.
I remember that story. Didn't the federal government say that they couldn't discriminate, but then the state was still saying they were going to discriminate against him? Isn't that what happened?
Well, kind of what happened was when they did all that, it was basically a year before the new federal guidelines came out that made it absolutely clear that you cannot prohibit a service dog based on its breed. So they were trying to pretend like they were within the law back in 2010, but by 2011 it was absolutely clear that you could not do that. So by 2011, that was the other piece of our ordinance that had to get worked on, was putting an exception in the ordinance that said you cannot ban someone's service dog if it's a pit bull, or you know, they were looking at that time to try to get rid of the entire ban, but they just didn't have the votes. They had the votes to get rid of 7 of the breeds and to put a service dog exception, but you know, that was basically all that they could do at that particular point in time with who they had on the council.
I know that they did take off, you know, 6 or 7 breeds. What is the standard procedure or proof to, 1, prove that a dog is a pit bull or not, and 2, prove that a dog is one of those other breeds that came off the restricted list? I mean, what is the process to identifying these animals? Because I know there, you know, realistically there's very little.
That's an excellent question, actually, because one of the kind of wins that they got in 2011 was they got an amendment added onto the ordinance to allow for a DNA test. So basically what happens is, if an animal control officer suspects your dog as being a restricted breed, which right now we define that as a majority of the physical characteristics of American Staffordshire Terrier, Staffordshire Bull Terrier, or American Pit Bull Terrier, if they think it's a majority, which is basically just over 50%, then they can seize your dog right then and impound it, or they can basically tell you you have to get a DNA test or we will impound your dog. And that actually happened to a client of mine who has a dog that is a show dog, American Bully.
Right.
American Bully is not on the list, but they basically told him, you let us do a DNA test or we are taking your dog right now. We're going to get the police. We're going to take your dog. We're going to impound it. And so he was like, okay, I'll let you get a DNA test. And they said, yeah, don't worry. 90% of the times the DNA test comes back as, you know, under, it has to be 51% or more of the DNA test for them to then say it's a restricted breed. They said 90% of the time it comes back under that, so you'll probably be fine. But if your dog comes in over that, we'll let you know and we'll give you an opportunity to get your dog out of the city. Well, what happened was, since his dog was a purebred, and American Staffordshire Terrier is one of the main breeds that they use to get the American Bully, the DNA came back as 75% Amstaff, and Animal Control mailed his DNA result to the wrong address, got it back in the mail, and the day they got it back in the mail, they sent officers over there. They took the dog out of his backyard while he was at lunch, and he comes home and his dog is gone.
I mean, just to throw it out there, not to interrupt, but everything that's being talked about right now is absurd violations of both the 4th and 14th Amendments of the United States. So, I mean, this is all un-American stuff going on right now.
And not only that, the 5th Amendment, too, because we have a right against self-incrimination. And basically, forcing someone to give a DNA test is forcing them to give you something that you wouldn't have. It's not, you're not telling them anything, and it's sort of like a search too. But yeah, you're absolutely right, but they told him, if you don't do this, we're taking your dog right now. And he thought, well, they told me that they'll let me know if the test comes back too high of illegal dog content. But they didn't tell him. They sent it to the wrong place, and then they just took his dog out of his backyard.
What happened to that dog?
Okay, so that dog's name is Hashbrown, and he was impounded for 10 days. This sweet family dog that has never harmed a fly.
Show dog. Hashbrown was a show dog.
A show dog, which is the other piece of it. Since he's a show dog, he's not neutered. And so they not only hit him with fines for it being an illegal dog, but for not being neutered. But the thing is, you can't register the dog in the city as a show dog, which you could with any other breed, because you can't register an illegal breed of dog. So it's like a catch-22. Even if they would have tried to register him, they would have been told no, because they would have been told they had to get rid of him. But anyway, this was before I got involved. My client had a friend of his basically provide a notarized letter saying, I will take Hashbrown until you guys figure this all out. Hashbrown went to live in Parker, which is one of our suburbs. The client got a hold of me, and I said, just go ahead and get Hashbrown with your family, which is in New York. So Hashbrown is currently in New York right now, and the charges are still pending. We had a meeting with the city attorney, and I showed him everything we had as far as this is an American bully. An American bully it's either AKC or UKC. I can't remember, and that's terrible. But they actually just got a new breed standard last year recognizing that breed.
Right.
But basically the guy was like, yeah, but you have this DNA test. And I said, well, I don't even think you should have been able to get that DNA test, because you didn't tell my client that he was giving up all of his rights against self-incrimination. So we just went back and forth on that. But currently we're scheduled for trial. Our trial date is actually before the vote on the ordinance. So I'm going to try to get a continuance to after the vote, because that was the other thing the city attorney did. He said, well, if they repeal the ordinance, then maybe we'll drop the charges. So, I'm kind of holding out hope for that a little bit too.
So the dog got out. That's what I was worried about. The dog got out, but it's in New York. They're thinking about relocating or getting out of the city. This is Aurora, right?
Yes.
Let's back up real quick. The vet that got his dog taken away, was this Denver or Aurora?
That was Aurora. Okay, there were
Was it Glenn Belcher?
Alan Grider was in Aurora.
Alan, okay.
Okay, and Glenn Belcher was actually in Denver. His dog was never actually taken away, but he was threatened by animal control when he tried to register his service dog. They said, unless you're deaf or blind, you're not entitled to a service dog. And then they said, and by the way, a pit bull can never be a service dog. But he was there were 3 people that actually sued Denver and Aurora, and that was Glenn Belcher, Alan Grider, and another woman named Valerie Piltz. I was on that case for about 10 months when I volunteered at another law firm.
What kind of monster says those two things? One, that you can't have a service dog unless you fit these small little definitions that he makes up, and 2, oh, by the way, pit bulls, they can't even be service dogs. They're not good enough. I mean, that right there tells you about the character of the person that is forcing this upon the population.
That was Doug Kelley, and he was the man that basically implemented Denver's pit bull ban and rounded up and killed 4,000 plus family dogs. Yeah, he was the one in charge of that. And what they did in Denver when their ban finally was upheld in the court, they went door to door. Everyone who had registered their dog, they went door to door and took their dogs and said, you have 1 week
This is
to
insane.
either relocate your dog or we're killing it. And by the way, you have to sign this piece of paper giving up your right to a hearing.
Oh, hell
Wow.
no.
Yeah.
Have you watched Beyond the Myth? Is
Yes.
the documentary that it goes into Denver, and actually some of the people who that happened to, they talk to them about it. But
That's a great documentary, and by the way, we should post that in Josh, the link to that. And actually, it's on demand. It should be on Netflix. Beyond the Myth.
Yeah.
It's a great documentary. If people listening haven't seen it, definitely
Well,
check it out.
that's the point that I tried to bring up in Pasadena, and while we were going through that, I mean, it's been put off to July because they didn't have the guts to vote on it, even though they didn't have anybody supporting it outside of Steve Madison. But that's one of the points that I brought up, was that they ask all these people to register their dogs. They say registration's down, blah, blah, blah. We're trying to educate the community, but, you know, it's not working. Licensing is down, etc. But then when you have someone like Madison, or in this case, whoever in Denver is sitting there on the council with these thoughts, Madison not only wants to ban pit bulls in Pasadena, but he wants to change the anti-BSL state law in the state of California. So if that's his intent and he's on the council, that just drives people away from registration, because if that ever comes to be, their dogs are going to be the first ones that are targeted because they registered them.
That's right.
So,
well, and it should be, you're supposed to allow those dogs to be grandfathered in, but it doesn't happen all the time. Like, I know in Denver, the reason why those people weren't grandfathered in was because they had actually instituted the ban in 1989, but then there were so many legal challenges, and our state we have a state ban on BSL too. And that went into effect in 2004. So what did Denver do? Denver sued the state of Colorado, called Denver versus Colorado, and they actually won on most of their points, because the judge basically said, okay, if you're a home rule city, which are these cities that, you know, Aurora's one of them too, if you're home rule, that means that you can just Wild West it and do whatever you want, and you don't have to follow the state law. So that happened in 2004, and so in 2005, when they got to actually enforce the ban again, that's when they went to everyone who had registered, because they didn't qualify to be grandfathered in. For years, I never registered my own dogs. Now I have to, because the spotlight is on me, and they've already come to my house once, and I have one dog who, she looks like a pit bull. She passed her DNA test, but, you know, I've never wanted to register any of my animals because I don't want them messing with me or taking them away.
it creates an atmosphere of fear, and it basically criminalizes owners who haven't even done anything. Back to the DNA test, like when a dog, first of all, the Animal Control Association doesn't even have any training in identifying dogs, so the fact that the Denver's AC are going out saying this dog is this and this dog is that is completely asinine. But when they do that, and then a DNA test is brought forth, who pays for that DNA test? Is it put back on the citizen, or?
The owner has to pay for it, and the test that they do in the shelter is $65. So let's say you're, another client I defended, actually, a dog he was transporting from Arizona to New Jersey through Colorado, and he decided to take this dog that had been a bait dog in Arizona to a dog park. Well, the dog freaks out, and, you know, there's an incident. Luckily, nobody was hurt, but, you know, animal control gets called, and they come out. And that dog, they wouldn't even let me get a DNA test for 10 days. And then I got the DNA test, but I still was able to cut a deal with the city attorney to let the dog out of impound, because the dog was dying in there. You know, he was already in terrible shape before he even got stuck there. So we cut a deal where we would pay the fine, because it's a $700 fine for restricted breed dog. We didn't plead guilty to restricted breed, but we paid the fine because that was what they wanted, was the money. We pled guilty to dog at large, and paid all the court costs and the impound fees, which so that's $1,000. Your dog gets out and whatever gets picked up as a restricted breed, you're looking at $1,000 period. Well, when the DNA test came back 2 weeks later, he wasn't even a restricted breed. He was Boxer, Mastiff, and American Staffordshire Terrier.
Just on that process alone, and the fact that it takes multiple weeks to even get to that point, how many? Because we know, all owners are not the same, and that doesn't make them bad dog owners. But how many people are actually not, one, going to pay that fine, and two, going to see the process through? So the majority of these dogs are just falling by the wayside of the process, right?
I think that they probably are. They're either one or two things are happening. Either the people are just saying, okay, you got me, try to make a deal with the city attorney, but I will get my dog out of, I'll give it to somebody who doesn't live in Aurora.
Right.
But the problem is, unless they really do a good job, they still are going to have to pay that $700 fine, even if they agree to get their dog out of the jurisdiction. So then the other thing but even if they say, oh, well, that's not my dog, they can still be charged with it being their dog if it was in their possession. So you've got people whose dogs ran off that get caught that never come forward because they know if they come forward, they're going to get hit with a $700 fine. Through Facebook, I found out an officer who is actually we have a big medical campus here, and so it's the University of Colorado Medical Campus, which is in Aurora, but it's not Aurora Police, it's CU Police. She had found these two pit bulls running at large. She was on her shift. She didn't know what to do with them, so she brought them to the Aurora Pound. Well, once she posted that on Facebook, we were all like, oh, my God, they're going to kill them, And so a bunch of rescue people tried to contact the pound to get the dogs out, and they were told, well, sure, you can come forward as this dog's owner, but if you do, it's going to be $1,000 automatically with the impound fee and the fine. So, it's just like, so if you know that your dog is a pit bull, quote unquote, then you just let them put it down as a stray because you're too afraid to go claim your dog.
What's going on here is they're shifting the burden of proof from the state or whatever, who have to prove that your dog is a pit bull, and that's under the presumption that this law is even legal, which it's not. It's unconstitutional. But the theory behind this law is pit bulls are bad. Well, the state needs to prove that the dog's a pit bull, and instead they're shifting that burden to the owner to prove that it's not a pit bull. This is falling into the mentality of like pre-crime from Minority Report, the Tom Cruise movie.
Yep.
No, you're absolutely right. And the thing is, when the DNA amendment was being introduced, the only way they could get it passed was if you put in it that the owner had to pay for it. Because if it would have been like you said, where the state or the city actually had to pay for it, the city council was not going to allow the amendment.
Well, they don't want taxpayers paying for that, but they do want taxpayers paying to kill thousands of dogs. I mean,
right, exactly.
It costs to do both things.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. They have to prove that the dog is a restricted breed, and so like for my client's dog, his name is Stallone. He's living in New Jersey now as a PTSD service dog, actually, the one that got grabbed originally here. But with him, I kept asking them for their breed determination because they're supposed to have 3 animal control officers look at the dog and do some kind of checklist or something of characteristics and say, yes, I think it has a majority of these characteristics. They never even did that for him.
What do you think about Cardell versus the city of Miami, which pretty much says that breed identification coming from an animal control officer is not reliable? I mean, it's a Supreme Court case.
That is actually how before the DNA test came around. That's how most animal attorneys were able to get their clients' dogs off. You know, basically,
Right.
you would have to hire a UKC judge to come into court and testify that this dog does not meet either the AKC or the UKC standards for, you know, whichever breed they were trying to say that was. Really, who has the money? Number one, who has the money to hire a lawyer, for one thing? That's part of why most of what I do is very, very low, like, cost, because people can't. If I actually charged what it took me for Stallone, it would have been at least $10,000, and who can pay someone $10,000? You know.
And that's the racket in all this, because then all these dogs get killed because their owners don't have the money, they don't have the time, they don't have the patience to go through this lengthy, asinine process, and then the state gets to sit up there and say, well, we did the right thing, and no one wanted to fight it, and we're doing all this good work, and the dogs are basically implied to be guilty when they're all innocent.
The dog Stallone, who was the bait dog, he did, when he was brought into the dog park, he did rush at a little dachshund and pin her to the ground. So something happened. She didn't really get hurt, so something did happen there. But like Hashbrown was just walking down the street. Most of the time, and this is even what Animal Control said when they were testifying in favor of keeping the ban. They said people's neighbors turn them in. Wow. Okay? So they want your neighbor to turn you in, and they think that's good.
I mean, that sounds like hell on earth, pretty much to me.
This is like Orwellian. Did the dog Stallone, that's your dog, pinned a little dog to the ground?
Now, Stallone was a former bait dog in Arizona. He had actually been stolen out of his backyard and thrown in the ring for bait. Had his legs hobbled, had his teeth filed down.
This is your dog. This is your dog, Stallone.
This is not my dog. This was a client's dog.
Oh, okay. Well, I wanted to touch on that point real quick. The pinning the down thing, and if people see that, it's not bad. The dog didn't get hurt. What your dog was doing from a training standpoint, I just thought I'd pipe in. I just experienced this the other week with one of my dogs. This little dog came running over to my dogs, and my Rocky came up and did the same thing and pushed the dog down. What they're doing is they're saying, "Hey, calm down." They're not attacking the dog because we have strong dogs. If a big dog like a pit bull grabs a little dog with the intention of killing it, that's what it's gonna do. But this dog, when they pin other dogs, if you see this, people, it's not an attack. It's a, hey, calm down, buddy. Everyone's calm here. You need to relax because this is not how we are here. So that's just one of my little 2 cents. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, and in everyone's defense in that case, I don't think Stallone, he should not have been brought to a dog park because he thought he was going back into the ring, you know, so, I mean, so he hadn't been desensitized or anything.
No dog parks, not just for pit bulls, especially pit bulls that have been ringed, bait dogs, but any big dog, because that, again, if you haven't heard this, it's on our other podcast, dog parks are not proper canine socialization. They're not a good idea for any big dog because there's all this jockeying for rank in the dog parks, and that's not how you socialize dogs. Go.
As an animal attorney, I tell people to steer clear of them. Unfortunately, my dog loves it there, though, you know. So I have brought her a few times, but again, she actually blew her knee out playing too hard at the dog park. So, you know, it's...
Well, I'm not saying, look, people know each other, they know each other's dogs, that's one thing. If you have a super sweet dog, that helps as well. But if you have a super sweet dog, it doesn't mean every dog is going to be that sweet. So the point I'm making, and I actually wrote this in a blog, is that, yeah, we're just know that if you take your dog, I'm not particular to you, Juliet, but if you take your dog to a dog park, you're kind of setting them up to fail. You could have the sweetest dog in the world. You got some dog with bad manners who wants to dominate everybody, and then you got to fight. And then your sweet dog, which is a pit bull, is crucified, and you got to go to New Jersey, and you got to go out of state, and you got to hide your dog because some other dogs started crap with him.
It's kind of ironic you bring that up because so Ginger, yeah, she's brindle and she looks very much. I could probably get her to come in here, but I have her and then I have a rat terrier. Well, the rat terrier is the one I have to worry about. He's the one that's always trying to, attack the big dogs. But normally everyone had always been cool, but one time I was there and it was right after an article had ran in the Sentinel, which is our local paper, where Ginger was on the front page, and it was all about, us trying to repeal the pit bull ban. So she was like all over the page, and this guy was bringing his dog into the park. Well, Ginger and Cooper is my other one, were barking at the fence. Well, they bark at the fence because there's a fence. He basically wouldn't bring his dog in because he said that, oh, well, that's the angriest greeting I've ever encountered or something. And I was like, well, just give me a second. I can put them on their leashes. And he was just like, no, I'm leaving. And he like stormed off. It was just my two dogs, a lady whose dogs were in her car, and this guy. And I was just like, well, did he just do that because he saw us on the front page and he, recognizes her and he hates pit bulls, or, I don't know.
There seems to be a theme that keeps popping its head up. It's called trolls. And every time we do a podcast, there's physical trolls. We mostly encounter these trolls online, but I think you actually saw a real-life troll.
No, this is a proper segue because my next question was literally going to be about this.
Hold that thought. I just wanted to touch on the little dog thing. At this time, what's the date today? It's March. What's the date today?
9th.
The 9th? March 9th. The other night, Cesar Millan's show premiered called Cesar 911, and I encourage everybody to watch this because they addressed the little dog syndrome. And they showed this one dog who's supposedly the terror of the two dogs, who's reacting to this little dog who's not on a leash. So you got the big dog who they say is attacking the little dog, but the little dog's not on a leash. So everybody, when you come across a little dog, if you have a little dog, those dogs get away with murder. That's Mickey. He's a little dog right now, starting to shit in the background. If you have a little dog, you got to control them. You can't have them off leash because they are the instigators. And they're like that little guy that runs over and starts shit in the club, and then he runs away as soon as the fight happens. So you want to steer clear of little dogs. If you have a little dog, you got to get him under control. This little guy comes along and starts shit in the park with other dogs, and I have to keep him on a leash really tight, close to me. Anyway, Josh, you were saying your next segue?
Yeah, I just had a two-part question for Juliet. One, how do you feel since they're the only people in the media basically pushing all this anti-pit bull stuff? How do you feel about dogsbite.org and their supporters and the grandstanding coming from them on the backs of all the shelter killing, as if, like, for example, in Pasadena, since we have an anti-BSL law, they can't put in a ban, so the next best thing is to, mandatory spay and neuter for just pit bulls because they're dangerous. And we need to also do it because X, Y, and they're all getting killed, and we're doing it for the dog's good. So how do you feel about that disingenuousness? And two, what's your thoughts on Kory Nelson, who's obviously, relative to Denver, coming out and saying that he hopes that a celebrity's child is killed by a pit bull so they can advance their cause further?
Oh my God, he actually came out and said that?
Oh, you didn't even know that he said that? Yes, he did.
No, I didn't. Well, so your questions are pretty much intertwined because I firmly believe that Kory Nelson is behind dogsbite.org, or at least feeding them information or something. So he's the city attorney in Denver, and his claim to fame is he was able to, convince the courts that the ban should not be thrown out as basically there was a couple challenges. There were constitutional challenges, and then there was the challenge when we had the state law go into effect. But that's his claim to fame, is I'm the reason why we still have the pit bull ban in Denver. But let's go to your other question. I think it is terrible. Any fear-based organization that basically takes a tragedy and uses that tragedy to put forth whatever their agenda is. I just think that that's completely, disgusting and reprehensible. And the way that dogsbite.org actually does it, they make people think that if you're walking down the street and somebody has a pit bull, it's going to come and maul your face off,
Right.
Like they put it out there just so ridiculously. And, I kind of wonder how they feel about here in Evergreen. We had just last week, there was a 10-month-old that was left alone with the family's American Bulldog. Somehow the Bulldog bit the child either in the face or in the head, I don't know. And so animal control drugged the Bulldog off, and the family said kill it. They killed their own dog yesterday. And what I would like to know is what happened. Why was the dog able to injure this child? Was somebody watching the baby?
Well, that's never the focus. That's never the focus, is it?
No, it's never the focus. It's always what did the dog do? And, you have a dog and you have a baby. They both pretty much have about the same mental capacity, except for maybe a dog is more like a 2 or 3-year-old. But, it's not like you can't trust them alone. It's just like if you left 2 3-year-olds alone together, if one of them hurt the other one, would you put down the kid that hurt the other one? No. It's like it would be the parents' fault or whoever was supposed to be watching them. Of course, since it was their own dog, they were able to just say, okay, put him to sleep. But I would have liked to have been able to help that dog and actually get it out of there and maybe into a better situation. But it all happened so quickly. And it's like I wouldn't have had any standing anyway because it's their property to do with what they want.
That crowd, the Dogs Bite crowd, called that dog a pit bull online in numerous places, even though, like you said, it was American Bulldog or what have you. So that, they look at dogs and they just say, that's a pit bull. Mastiffs are pit bulls. XYZ is a pit bull. And then they pad their stats with all these. Not all these, because we know there's only like 30 fatalities that happen every year. But they pad the stats and say, 70% of them are pit bulls, when half those dogs, there's not even an image out there of the dog. It doesn't even exist. We're just going off media accounts of what a dog was.
Well, and okay, so here's again the reason why you can't go on media accounts is the media is there's going to be 2 headlines. If they think it's a pit bull, it's going to say pit bull attacks.
Yep.
If they don't know what it is, it's going to say dog.
Just last week, within the last 10 days, there's been, I think, 4 fatalities. Only one was pit bull related, and all the other headlines said dog.
You're right, and the thing is, so and those were fatalities, so those are going to get reported. But just a bite, I firmly believe that if it's a Labrador Retriever or, a Golden Retriever or Cocker Spaniel, that's probably not even going to be reported, So if you're going off of media reports, it's not like the media has some kind of thing where they have to report every single incident that happens. They're going to report what they think is going to sell, if they're TV, whatever's going to get people to watch, if they're a newspaper, whatever's going to get people to buy it. So
it's called If It Bleeds, It Leads. We touched on this on our last podcast with a 4-day period in 2007, and each attack that wasn't a pit bull got like 1 or 2 mentions in the local paper, and the one pit bull attack was international in over 230 pages. Publications and news organizations. By the way, we know not to believe everything we hear or read when it comes to the media, except when it comes to pit bulls, I guess. I guess that's how it works, right?
Right, and, getting back to what we started this whole conversation about, which is, how is it that every single major news outlet got it wrong on the last, city council meeting? It's because they don't even do any kind of investigation. They go off of one source's headline, and then the rest of them. You know, we had an editorial in the Denver Post saying, "Yay, Aurora is keeping their ban. They are keeping the public safe." And it's like, you know, part of me is like, I don't want them to know that it's actually still going on, because I want them to stay out of it.
And this is all based off of Rachel, I think, Sappin's headline from the Aurora Sentinel. They just took it and ran with it and started parroting it as if it was fact, when in reality the vote's not for another 2.5 weeks.
Right. And, you know, to be honest to her, I don't actually know who is it that puts out the headline. Is it actually the reporter, or is it someone else in the paper? And I kind of have a feeling that headline might have been sensationalized, because the editor of the Aurora Sentinel, his name is Dave Perry, he hates
Dave Perry,
pitbulls.
Embellished and added untruths and hyperbole. Is that what you're saying to me again? Was it Brent? Was it Brent Toellner? In his article, which we should post up, that one you sent me, Josh. Oh, his first opening line is, he's had many jobs, and in each of his experiences with these jobs, he's went to the experts in those fields to learn. And he kind of makes the comparison that if you're going to do anything, if you're going to approach anything and be an expert or be a witness or testify for or against something, maybe you should do a little research. And that's what these, it's not just in dog bites and pit bulls and this, it's with every bit of the media, of these lazy reporting. They're going to Twitter. They're going off of each other. Have you seen that thing that Conan O'Brien does, where he goes and he gets all the different news anchors that are doing the same story? Not only are they doing the same story, they're saying the same script.
Yes, so it's all teleprompter reading.
We're talking about 24-hour news, and each one is trying to pull in the viewer. So once again, if it bleeds, it leads. They need to get attention. They need to shock you. They need to hold your attention so that they can get paid. So people, that's where your news is coming from.
That's crazy, Juliet, that Dave Perry is actually the editor. I didn't even put the 2 and 2 together, but I had a go-around with Dave Perry back in November of last year, and anybody watching this can just Google the article I wrote about it. Aurora columnist Dave Perry is a fool, and that's the headline. And it details, because it's in response to an op-ed that he did, which was an anti-pitbull op-ed, and he had the most absurd claims in this thing, and to think that he's actually the editor of this paper is quite ridiculous. Just speaking to Denver and Aurora in general, and some of the numbers that are out there, I know you're far more familiar with the happenings and the going up of dog bites and everything than I am. But just in general, if the target is a specific breed and then you get rid of all of those dogs, or like you said, you go through the town and they kill 4,000 dogs, it's inevitable that anything that happens involving those types of dogs is going to go down. That doesn't justify the fact that all the dogs are to be villainized and vilified and killed because one could potentially at some point act out, and you're killing thousands. I mean, they're highlighting how the bites have went down from pit bulls, but they've killed them all. So how is that a legitimate claim? When bites of all dogs have went up. Can you talk a little bit about just the numbers and the shell game that they're using to kind of justify?
There's a couple things that go into that. Number one is, it's not the fact that it is a pit bull that is why the dog bites. It's because it's a dog.
Right.
So that's why the numbers our numbers have actually gone up as far as how many dog bites we have in the city. And it's because people who are going to have a dog are going to have a dog, regardless of the breed.
Exactly.
So what you have is, now you have the major, it's either Labrador Retriever or Golden Retriever. I'm sorry, I can't remember which, but those are the highest number of dog bites. Well, it's also because it's one of the most popular breeds of dogs. Does that mean we get rid of that breed of dog? No. More people have those dogs, and those dogs are dogs, so they're going to bite. Their whole correlation is they assume that if it's a pit bull, it's going to bite. That is the kind of the false reality that they're going into. There actually was a American Journal of Veterinary Medicine article that came out in 2010, and it talked about how many dogs would you have to ban to prevent one injury that needed plastic surgery. Okay, so for per 100,000 people, you would have to ban almost 9,000 dogs because of their statistical analysis. Wow. So that's any breed of dog.
The key and the point is to educate people about how to prevent those situations from happening, which is to 1, supervise your child, 2, not have a roaming or at-large dog, and 3, not have a chained yard dog and mix children with it, and not have a chained yard dog in general because it's cruel and inhumane, especially if you're going to leave them out in the yard 24/7.
Tethered is a good way to get a mean dog. I wanted to touch back on from the 1960s to the 70s. I'm going back to Karen DeLisa's book. We were talking about the popularity of a dog, and then you hear more increased dog bites. In the 60s and 70s, I'm going directly from Karen DeLisa's book, The Pit Bull Placebo. In the 60s and the 70s, the German Shepherds were the most popular, and that's when we heard about the most dog bites to those with that particular breed. So she writes, whenever there's an increase in popularity of a breed, that's when dog bite attacks increase, and the substandard owners go and get that dog because they think it's a bad dog, a badass dog, not bad like bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good. So yeah, it happened to bloodhounds, to shepherds, to pinchers, and now with pit bulls, it seems to be longer than any other breed.
Actually, we had a very intelligent question by one of our council members at the study session, which is what we were at, last week. We actually provided the scholarly articles to him, and he asked animal control. He said, I'm reading these articles, and they talk about, there are the bully breeds that comprise this number of dog bites, but then what about, the next highest number are, shepherds, huskies, I think, and something else. He said, why are we focusing on the pit bulls and not these other dogs when they're next in line, basically? And she said, well, it was a policy decision when the ban was put in place, meaning it's not based on facts, it's not based on science, it's based on policy, meaning we want to target a certain type of people, and they've come out and said this. Right. They said, we don't want these people in our town, and they think these people are gangbangers, basically.
This exact thing happened in Lancaster, where the mayor of Lancaster out here in California said, we want to get rid of all the gangbangers. We're having problems, so what are we going to do? We're going to target the dogs that we think that they have. And he made no bones about it. This wasn't him trying to color up his position and hide it. It's Google it. Rex Paris, Lancaster. He'll come right out and say it. He wants to eliminate gangbangers and black people from Lancaster, and he's targeting pit bulls to do it.
So wait a minute. That's the most silliest thing I've ever heard. So wait a minute. They live. If we're talking about gangbangers, is it mostly public housing and the ghetto, so to speak? So are they staying there because they want to live there, and the dogs are what's going to make them move to a better side of town? I don't understand. That's kind of silly.
It doesn't make any sense, and quite frankly, we never even had a problem in Aurora. I mean, that's the other thing that they are pretty much admitting, is that this was done in reaction again to Denver, our neighbor, because when Denver's ban that's why it was 2005, 2006, Aurora said, oh my God, we don't want those people moving here. Right. And all those people are going to move here if we don't have this ban. So, I mean, we didn't even have all these gangsters running around with dogs.
It's just people grabbing at straws and trying to justify their crazy position. I mean, Brent made that point in his article, and the article is entitled Stoking Fear and Hysteria in Aurora. if you want to target gangbangers, you don't go after their dogs. You go after the human beings that are doing and involved in certain incidents. You involve the FBI. You involve the SWAT team. You don't call out animal control to get rid of gangbangers. That's not how it works.
Do you think these people care about if they lose their dog? They'll just go get another one. So that right there is ridiculous. But yeah, in that article, he brought up that the towns that did enact the ban, the areas around them didn't have an influx in dog bites or anything, so that was just another silly argument.
They're trying to make it seem like if Aurora overturns this, all the dogs are going to flood into Aurora, and it's just fear-mongering tactics. I mean, right?
It is, absolutely, and we actually had one of the dog behavioralists from the Longmont Humane Society, which Longmont is north of us, and they do not have a ban, and she basically told city council last week that they don't have like pit bulls like running rampant just because they're legal there. You know, so the fact is, if Aurora's reasoning was correct, then every other city, because we only have 8 jurisdictions that ban these dogs, and so every other jurisdiction would be overrun if that was really, you know, what was going to happen. But getting rid of the ban is really going to do is it's going to let people move here that want to move here with their family member that happens to be a pit bull, that are the scientists and the doctors and the nurses and the military, because we have a military base, we have a huge medical campus now, and and our medical school is now in Aurora. So, we have people coming in who are like, I'm not going to move there, and I'm not even going to go to work at the University of Colorado Hospital because I'm not going to work somewhere where I can't live because of my dog.
What is the vicious dog ordinance that the city attorney of Aurora is trying to put forth as an alternative to this current ban?
Okay, so actually what happened with that is it was because they knew that the repeal was not going to die. So what he's actually recommended is like a kind of a 2-tiered system of the vicious dog ordinance, because right now they treat every incident the same, basically. And so he's kind of saying for, minor infractions, because see, under our ordinance, again, if your dog barks at another dog through the fence, your dog can be considered a vicious dog.
Dear God.
Okay, so it's a dog that either appears, basically a dog that does something that freaks you out. That is a vicious dog. But so is the dog that chews your foot off. That is a vicious dog. Wow. And they're all treated the same.
Tino, what is your thoughts on that craziness? I mean, from a training perspective, if a dog barks at another dog, it could potentially be a vicious dog. I mean, that is just.
Well, that just sounds like fear mongering and an agenda. Look, we're coming after you, and we're going to use whatever we can to ban your dog. That's what that is. I mean.
Well, this is our current law. This is what we already have. Okay, what we already have is basically it's all based on the afraid person's perception of what the dog is doing. So if, like, let's say, I'll give my example again. Let's say you're walking your dog in front of somebody's house and their dog can see you through the fence and is lunging at the fence. They could report you for having a vicious dog, even though your dog never did anything other than cause them to, be freaked out,
Yeah, it's preying on people's fear and ignorance, and it perpetuates itself. Like, I know you saw what ColoRADogs wrote about the lady and the letter that they wrote in response to Colleen Lynn. I mean, that lays it out beautifully. That was an awesome post.
Yeah, that was a really good post, and what they talked about was the one little old lady that actually came to speak at our city council meeting about, you know, everything she'd read on dogsbite.org. And Nancy, the founder of ColoRADogs, went and talked to her afterwards and was like, I just want to explain to you our side, and that we wouldn't want to repeal this ban if these dogs were these, you know, bloodthirsty, vicious animals. And it sounds like from her post that this little old lady actually kind of got it. But yeah, Colleen Lynn and her whole organization, you know, they feed off of that fear and making these poor little old ladies terrified. Me and my neighbor, who is he's retired military, we went to it's the only time, I've lived here 12 years, I've never gone to a ward meeting ever. We went, my council member, you know, we sat, it was held in a nursing home, our meeting, so it's all these little old people. And apparently, I didn't know this, but our councilwoman is one of, like, dogbite.org's huge supporters. Her name is Molly Markert, and she basically gave a little 2-minute spiel about why she would never vote to repeal the ban, that a friend of hers child was mauled by a pit bull, and we've dug into that story, and we found it's a complete fabrication. It never happened, but it's something that she tells, and she told it again the other night at City Council, and her story had changed from the week before, so that's part of how we know it's a fabrication. But, you know, so she apparently, I found out later, was handing out flyers on the other side of the room, because she knew we were the pit bull people, because we've gone and spoken so many times, but she was handing out flyers against pit bulls on the other side of the room. And after the 2-hour meeting, I just jumped up really quickly and said, hi, you know, I'm Juliet, this is Terry. We have information here, so if anyone would like a flyer. And, you know, and actually one little old man took one, but basically then she tells City Council that everyone in her ward supports the ban. And it's like, no, they don't.
This is the same thing that happened in Riverside, because out here in California, it's went Riverside County, Riverside City, Pasadena, and it's kind of went, BSL's been traveling, but it first came up in Riverside County about 5 months ago, and there was probably, I'd say, about 20 public speakers. Probably about 15 of them were for the pit bulls, and there was 5 of them against pit bulls and saying we need to bring in BSL. But my point is, anytime someone went up and gave a public comment supporting the agenda to villainize the dogs, the media would, as soon as they left the podium, numerous media members would track them down in their seats, pull them out, and get quotes from them. And they would not do this to myself or anyone else. Anyone that went up there and spoke about how this law does not make any sense, they didn't bother to even talk to.
So we've had now 2 city council meetings where the advocates have come forward and talked. One was on February 24th, and I put out a press release before that, and we held a Bring Hashbrown Home rally. And our media did cover that, and they did interview Hashbrown's owner, and they put his whole story on the news, and they showed the parts from the public speakers saying why we want the ban taken away. And at that meeting, there was no one in favor of the ban, because basically it wasn't on the agenda as an item. It was, we basically got word that we needed to show up and have our voices heard, so we organized something very quickly. But with Stallone and with Hashbrown, these are stories affecting real people with a real animal, and they get to see kind of the human element of what these dogs mean to people, and neither of those dogs did anything that would cause you to, you know, want to demonize them.
Juliet,
Yes.
you were saying that the media was kind of given a fair shake to both sides on your side, right?
Well, it depends on the news organization, okay? And it depends on who you talk to in the news organization.
Right.
Because, for example, the Aurora Sentinel, Dave Perry is going to go totally insane. But his individual reporters, I've had some very, very fair reports done by them. The Denver Post is classically anti-pit bull, but one of their editors actually had me on doing a 10-minute interview.
We have social media and we have money on our side when it comes to this fight, because what's happening is it's already the information's already there, and what it comes down to is the bottom line. If the money is being spent and it doesn't need to be spent and it's being wasted on all these witch hunts, it's already proven to be ineffective, and all it's doing is costing taxpayers money. So as these stories come out, and as people come out that are in places of power and point out, look, not only are bites up and it's ineffective, but it's costing us money. Hold on, stop it. It's costing us money. So we have, social media, people with their stories and their beautiful stories and their beautiful family dogs, and we have money, which is the bottom line, which I think is the answer to this, is pointing out, look, all the money you're spending and dog bites are up with your ban.
Absolutely, and I actually am going to try to get those statistics without having to do an open records request, because every time I do an open records request, somehow it costs me several $100s.
Same here. Same here. Same here. Happens here too.
So, but one number that came out at the last meeting was Aurora spent, it was like $132,000 in 2012 just on the lawyer for the Grider case.
Wow, and that's just one person standing up for their dog. Just imagine if the people had the fortitude to, every time their dog was taken, sue these people, because that's what needs to happen. Sue these people and these illegal laws. A couple weeks ago, I was listening to Fred and Chris over at Pit Bulletin Legal News, and they had on Nancy from ColoRADogs and Jennifer from ColoRADogs, and they were talking about how you, Juliet, went around the community and collected signatures yourself. And I want to ask you about that, because I want to start doing that here in Pasadena, because our meeting's not until mid-July. And the thing that Madison does is he tries to say, well, all these people coming in from other municipalities don't count, even though he's trying to repeal a state anti-BSL law. He's saying, well, how many people are from Pasadena? So I want to go around and do that signature collecting to come back with Madison and be like, X amount of people here in this community oppose what you're trying to do. So just tell me a little bit about, that process.
Yeah, well, so I have a group of just very loyal supporters. We actually met each other going to all the rallies on the cops shooting dog cases, because we have multiple of those going on. So I met this great group of people, and my kind of our man too is my neighbor Terry, who, so basically, we had all been talking about, we really need to get a petition together. Well, what happened was we got word like on a Wednesday that the following Monday we needed to show up at City Council. So Wednesday during the day I find this out, and I'm like, oh my God, I better do something. So I put together a petition. And at first I started with, I just sent it to Kinko's. I basically just had a pamphlet printed out, and I had 6 of them made. And basically I had to go back to the printers 5 more times, because it was me, my friends, we just started going around places just saying, hey, do you support the ban? And people are like, hell no. And they wanted to sign it. We got 1,100 signatures from Wednesday night is when I started collecting some until, midday Monday. 1,100 signatures, wow. 600 of them were Aurora.
That's
and
awesome.
It was just going to dog parks, going to PetSmart, we actually have a bar in town that is a dog park bar. So you could go get your alcohol and have your dog run around. But it was me and like about a dozen other people just going around and getting signatures, and that was in 4 days.
That's awesome. Everybody watching, that's how you do it right there. That's what you got to do when this tyrannical stuff comes down in your community. That's what you do right there. Is there anything that you want to promote? Any events? I know the vote is coming up on March 24th, right?
Yes. It's March 24th. We want everyone in the state who can come to come. I'm actually doing another peaceful rally. We don't want any kind of a protest like, ooh, angry. We don't do that. We want happy people, but we also want, I figured anyone whose dog has had to be banished, we could do like a bring home whoever rally kind of thing, and just to kind of, that's how you get the media there, and you do want the media to kind of cover things to show the good side, because so many times they just see, pit bull owners are these crazy people, but they're not. They're you, they're me, they're your neighbor down the street. They're all kinds of good people who just happen to fall in love with a dog. Like Ginger, I found her in a parking lot at 3 months old.
And just because you're crazy doesn't mean it's because of your dog.
Right? Ginger!
Bandit's making his appearance.
Here's the awful one. This is my horrible, horrible dog, Cooper. Get down! Get down! Ginger, come here! Come here, Ginger! Come here! Oh.
You're making my dogs go crazy.
So this is Ginger.
Juliet, thank you so much for coming on. This was excellent. Hopefully people take a lot from this exchange, and just thank you so much for what you're doing on the ground there. You're very inspiring to myself and to Tino and to everybody. So, and thank you for what you're doing for our dogs.
Awesome, I agree. And Rocky's saying thank you. This is Rocky Piccone. She's my female pit bull named Rocky. I call her my pit bulldog. But Julia, do you have a website or anything you want people to go to?
Sure. If they go to ColoRADoanimalattorneys.com, that'll get them to my website, and I have a Facebook page too. So my law firm is actually called the Piccone Law Firm, but I have my own. ColoRADO Animal Attorneys is my trade name for all my animal law stuff. But on Facebook, it's the Piccone Law Firm. But if you go to ColoRADoanimalattorneys.com, there's a link there to my Twitter and my Facebook.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
See you, Juliet. Thank you.
Thank you.